evening from Swansea, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are watching Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for professional wrestling, insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. And it's a Monday, and you know what that means. It means it's time to open your mail. We have quite a few questions to answer that you guys have submitted this week via our Instagram stories, and it's going to be a very fun show indeed. But for a fun show, I need a fun panel, and I do have one. And let's kick things off with the co-host of the show. How are you, Clark?
I'm fired up to be here. Last minute replacement chaos. I hope you're feeling better, no doubt about it. But I mean, when Ben calls for the righty from Southern California, I'm ready to come out of the bullpen at any moment. And I'm excited because I didn't really want to miss Mailbag Monday anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always a fun one. And like you said, Chaos has a cold, but you came in with the hot tag. But also joining us, we have David Sheldon, the AEW reviewer for us here at Wrestling Republic. How are you, David?
Hello, everybody. Very excited to finally be back on a daily show. The world seems to have been conspiring against me for the last few weeks with various last-minute work changes and all the rest of it that's put me out of several dailies. But I'm finally back to talk about some mailbag questions. There's some very interesting ones here, so very excited. Let's get straight into it. Oh, one more thing before we start, actually. This week could be, if I see all the shows I'm hoping I'm going to see, the most wrestling shows I'll have ever seen live in a week. So fingers crossed, all in weekend. Here we go.
I actually want to find this out now. What shows are you going to see?
Well, I'm definitely going to the Dynamite and Collision taping in Cardiff, and I'm definitely going to All In. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to try and get to Riot Cabaret, the Eve Tokyo Joshi duo show, Rev Pro, and Progress this week. I will not get to them all. I'm going to try. So we're going to see how we go. I want to see about schedules and things like that. But yeah, in any event, I'm going to try and get to some of the brilliant independent shows happening in the UK this weekend. And hopefully I will see some phenomenal wrestling.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many great ones. You mentioned the Progress show, and you also mentioned how you might not be able to go to them all. Now, you're going to have to fact check me on this one, but I believe the Progress show this Monday is sold out now. You might have to fact check me, but a text I received off the Progress Wrestling owner Lee earlier on today made me think that this week's show is full now. But do fact check me on it, because it might be the
Clark
next.
Taylor theory. There's always a way to get in. There's always
the last time
always.
As long as you believe, you can't.
The last
achieve,
time I checked,
there's always a way in.
The last time I checked, when I looked at tickets, it wasn't, because I could still buy tickets. I really hope it's not sold out. I really hope there's one ticket left so I can buy it. But if there isn't, then I'll be watching on demand on Progress Plus, as we all can. So
absolutely. And use our exclusive code for it as well. But yeah, double check me, because it's either this Monday show or it's the one later, in late September that sold out. I know one of them is sold out, so I presumed it was this week's show. But yeah, check on that one. But we do have quite a few comments. We have Bobby Batito saying hello. Hello, Bobby. I hope you're having a great Monday. With Anthony Manzano. Hello, Anthony. Hope you're having a great day as well. We got Melissa in the chat. Shout out to you, Melissa. I hope you're having a great Monday as well. And so, yeah, we got quite a few questions as well, but submitting mailbag questions, you can do it via our Instagram stories every week. They're posted every week on a Sunday night, and you can submit them via there. But we do have some great ones today, no doubt about it, and we're going to kick things off with a question from @spam_4_Langway, who is asking, is Roman Reigns the greatest star of the modern era? And I think the first part of this question to break down is, how do you define the modern era? Because if you don't break that down, then I think that's a little hard to, explain. I'm going to presume the modern era is PG era onwards. That's what I'm going to guess it is. But Clark, would you say that?
Yeah, and it's really not even close. I mean, if
Wow.
you think about what he's done since I mentioned the Wreck Everyone and Leave segment earlier this week, but if you think about when he called Bray Wyatt, rest in peace, the Fiend, a freak in a mask, ever since then, he's the biggest star in our business that we love so much, and he's the best at it. And it's really not close. He has an innate ability to do things that consciously we do not like go away for time or be dominant against people we really like. And it weirdly makes us more intrigued by him. And you don't get that often. He plays the game and knows the game as well as anybody. Got to give the wise man, Paul Heyman, some credit here too. But nobody's navigating the waters of professional wrestling and self-promotion, which is at the end of the day, the name of the game, than Roman Reigns since what I would consider the modern era has started. And maybe you can include a couple of bad segments as a slow start, but what he has done since that return in the Thunderdome onward, yeah, he's the biggest star by miles. He's the biggest deal by miles. Like, I really don't think there's a debate elsewhere, especially when it comes to recency, because you're talking too recent for it to be Cena. You're talking too recent for it to potentially be Orton.
Well, it depends, because
Becky
modern
Lynch is
era
the best
would
art-
hint PG era is included.
Maybe Becky Lynch. Well, are we talking the Triple H era, the Renaissance era, whatever?
Well,
There's
that's
all
what I
these
was
eras.
starting off by.
And
The
so
modern
that's
era is usually
even
classified by
so
PG
if we're
era
going back,
onwards.
if we're going back to like 08, I would still go what Roman's done in a shorter stretch is more impactful than what Cena did, despite Cena being the biggest star during that time. Becky Lynch, I think, would be like the only argument, but she's been on and off screen as much as Roman has in the same way. And Becky's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge Becky Lynch fan. I'm not trying to discount her in the argument against Roman Reigns, because if we're actually making a cut before a certain year, her great work started earlier in that timeline than Roman's did. But I just think it's honestly between those two for me, because I don't see I don't see an argument for another one. Honestly.
Wow. I mean, you do make a good point, and people in the comments, I'd love to hear from you guys. When do you think the modern era started? How would you really define that? Because that is an interesting one for sure. I mean, what about you, David? Who do you think has been the biggest, the greatest, as it says, star of this modern era? And also, I guess, when do you think the modern era started? Because that changes the entire question.
It's a fascinating question. It really is. I think it's interesting, though, if we take the PG era as the start of the modern era. I was 4 when WWE went PG. I'm 20 now. You know, I don't think that's particularly modern anymore, unfortunately. Although I do understand why that is the argument to be made. I don't really know when the modern era is classed by. I think typically it comes through major events. So by that, do you count COVID? If you count COVID, I think, yeah, he probably is at least the biggest start. If you count when Triple H took over, you could also make the argument. I would argue Cody up there as well. The question, obviously, greatest and biggest are also two different, because Roman probably is the biggest star in WWE for the last decade. A lot of that I've not particularly enjoyed. There have been huge chunks that I have. The Tribal Chief has mostly, not always, I've had my gripes, but mostly been a phenomenal character and the best thing Roman Reigns could ever have done is turning heel. Before that, I didn't care about Roman particularly. I always thought he was talented. I've always thought Roman Reigns is talented, but I've never felt like he was ever given the appropriate direction until COVID, until he went away. Obviously, him taking some time away from the company, coming back and winning the title and beginning his reign. From there, I think absolutely he probably is the biggest star, despite my own personal gripes with him going away for ages and coming back. I think it is between Roman and Cody, and I would give Roman the edge. Before that, again, Cena had the same problem, really, where Cena was, not booked especially well for large portions of the PG run, if you want to make it there. And obviously Taker wasn't there enough, so can't say him really. So there's certainly an argument for Roman. I sound like I'm flip-flopping, and it probably is because I am. But it's such a hard one. Rollins, I would honestly argue Rollins has probably had a better more consistent decade than Roman has in terms of what he's done. But Roman has been presented as the bigger deal than Seth. So again, if you go to the women, I agree on, Becky Lynch. I think Charlotte Flair has been presented as the biggest star of that women's division. I don't think she is, but I think that's how she's been presented. You had Bianca Belair as well recently since COVID as well. So there's a lot of potential arguments that you can make here. I don't think anyone outside of WWE right now could be outside of No, it's not Okada. Not enough people know Okada. Danielson, potentially, but obviously he was gone for a significant couple of years. So yeah, it probably is Roman. It probably is Roman, despite my own gripes and grievances with parts of his character and me not thinking that for all of this run he has been. But if I take modern era and say pandemic, then it's Roman. If I take modern era as Triple H, probably still Roman. So I don't. It's Roman or Cody, and I think Roman has been presented as the bigger deal in that time than Cody has. I don't think it goes back as far as PG because, like I said, that was 15, 16 years ago now, which I don't see to be modern anymore, to be honest. So yeah, if I'm gonna say from the pandemic onwards, which might not be modern, but that's what I would take as modern, then yeah, it is Roman.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one because, like you said, you can interpret it in so many different ways. To your point, if you say it's from the pandemic era onwards, I think Roman Reigns is undeniable. But if you say Triple H era onwards, in my personal opinion, I'm actually going to say Cody Rhodes at that point because, I mean the entire, since Triple H has been taken over, the entire company's been boxed around Cody Rhodes, right? Him finishing his story and all of that. But if we're saying the PG era onwards, I'm going to throw another name out there, and it's not John Cena, right? And this is taking all personal things, all things outside of wrestling aside, right? We're ignoring that. But if we're just focusing on the product itself, I think the biggest star since the PG era is not Hornswoggle. I think it is Brock Lesnar. I really do. Because I think all the stuff he's done in that time, or his win streak, all of it, I think that's the argument.
You guys,
I think that,
wrestling is at its biggest. Wrestling has been at its biggest during any of the eras, no matter how far we extend it back. While Roman Reigns was the face of the entire company.
You're not wrong.
By far. And to me, that's like the ultimate argument. Because no matter who, and Cody's great. I scoffed at that, but only because we already had the Cody Roman argument earlier in the week, and I just didn't want to dive back into it. I wasn't actually scoffing at you saying it. I was just like, please just shut up, Clark. Don't say anything about Cody here. I don't care. I just, for me, the Roman Reigns thing, it's like every poster he's on, big crowd. Anytime you announce him for an event, it's a bigger deal. You can't say the same about Cody, and there's something to be said about the consistency. You can't say the same about Seth. There's something to be said about the consistency. But as annoying as Roman and the absences are, as soon as they say he's on SmackDown, we're like, well, I'm going to watch it live. It doesn't matter. I can't see this on Twitter. Yeah. Like, I have to watch it live now that Roman's on the show.
It's the fact that since Roman's return, granted it was only a couple of weeks ago, but they've built pretty much every show around. They spent the entirety of Raw saying Roman's coming back on Friday. What did he do? Yeah. Pretty much nothing. He came out, spared Tongaloa a few times.
He doesn't need to. And that's how big of a star he is.
But that's what's so fascinating, David, is if they tell you that Cody's going to be on SmackDown, you might be like, oh, that's cool. I'll check out the Cody segment. But when they say it's Roman, it's like, oh, wait, I have to. He's going to be there?
Yeah.
He's back?
That's true. But I think by that point, I don't think many people were tuning in every Friday to see what John Cena was going to do.
No, I don't. And
that's true.
But a lot of people would consider it to be Cena. Would be the biggest star of the last 20 years in wrestling. So again, it's a very difficult question to answer, but I do agree. I think if Lesnar hadn't have disappeared for the reasons that he's disappeared for the last year or so, I think it would be a lot more prescient in people's minds. I think people have almost blocked him out recently, but I don't think you're wrong, Ben. I had not given him a second thought, but when you said it, now you've got a point. You really have got a point there with Brock.
Yeah, Lord Virus of Nurgle agrees with me, and he says he disagrees with you, Clark. Meanwhile,
fine.
Bobby Petito says Randy Orton, which is a good shout too.
Orton's one of my faves, but I think that Roman sort of took a little bit of the best of both Orton and Lesnar. I think you can point to those two. On once Roman found his stride, he's got the strike kind of out of nowhere aspect in some ways, even though it's usually not technically out of nowhere, but the calm, scary type personality wise that Randy had. And then he's also got that, I don't want to say extended absence, but the absence makes the heart grow fonder in a way that Brock did.
That's true. That's a good comparison.
Factor. Just the pure intimidation factor is there, and Roman's kind of coupled the two together in a way that's just a juggernaut. Because if this version of Roman had been the one to end the Undertaker streak, it's not the same reaction as when Brock did. We were upset about that. Everyone was upset about that. No one thought Brock needed that. You know what I mean? And I look back at that, and believe me, Division I champion, freestyle, folk style, absolute stud, Brock Lesnar. But I just think by comparison, the other part is the fact that they've both been Paul Heyman guys. You can make the direct comparison there. One of them relies entirely on Paul Heyman to speak. The other one, it's more of a partnership. And that's Roman Reigns. It's much more of a partnership with Roman and Paul because Roman speaks significantly more often than Brock ever did.
I think there's an ironic potential argument as well for somebody who wasn't there for a large portion of it, and that's Punk. You know,
that's what I as soon as you mentioned Heyman, I thought Punk's a shout.
Yeah, I mean, he's not been there for the last. You know, he didn't turn up till 2021, but. I mean, he was the topic of everyone's conversations for 7 years. I think right now you could make the case Punk is up there, but no, he doesn't beat Roman. I do think it is probably is Roman.
Yeah, no, I am. I do think I agree with both of you. I think ultimately we need to define what modern means. We need to define, the time period for that, which the question didn't give. But I think it's hard to argue, right? I think an era's too short to be the Triple H era alone. So I think we've got to go as far back as at least the pandemic. And since then, undoubtedly, Roman Reigns has been the guy. Mainly because he's been the champion for 90% of it. But Lord Virus of Nurgle says that he'd rather watch Drew McIntyre than Roman Reigns. John Michael saying hello.
But again, that's personal preference. I'd rather watch Drew than Roman. I'd rather watch Ospreay than Roman. I'd rather watch a lot of people than Roman. But I still think Roman is undeniable. Despite my own personal, I can put my own personal feelings. And I really like Roman, but I can put my feelings on Roman mostly to one side and still say he probably is the biggest star.
I think, quite actually strangely, I think I'd rather see a Drew McIntyre segment than a Roman Reigns segment, and I'd rather see a Roman Reigns segment than a Will Ospreay segment, but I'd rather see a Will Ospreay match than a Roman Reigns match, but I'd rather see a Roman Reigns match over a Drew McIntyre match. So it's kind of complete polar opposites compared to their in-ring segments versus their actual in-ring matches.
I truly enjoy all three, but my opinion is that Roman's just actually found the perfect formula for himself. And we do know about his health, right? Outside of when it comes, I mean, he's still on oral chemotherapy. We can't forget that. And shows up as a physical specimen, but that takes serious work to manage day in and day out. And that's part of the reason he's got to work the schedule that he does. But it is, in a weird way, I'm not saying blessing in disguise because cancer is not a blessing in any way. And obviously, like, what a battler. Monster shout out to Joe, not just Roman, right? When it comes to that. But
of course,
the fact is he's got to be home at times to treat that. But it has also lent to this formula where all of a sudden when he can be around and when he is around, it's so impactful. It's so old school compared to anybody else in the modern generation that it benefits him. And I know that's only one variable when it comes to that in the schedule and everything. And he's earned it too. But it, to me, that's what separates him from everybody else is he is the definition of a special attraction.
Undoubtedly. He undoubtedly is. I mean, a heck of a star. You know me, Clark. I'm a big Roman Reigns guy. But I think we're all on the same page here. The answer probably is Roman Reigns, but let's define the term modern era. But now, let's move on and talk about another name we've spoken about, Mr. Cody Rhodes. Because we have a question submitted by at Arshay0723, who's asking, will Cody still be champion come WrestleMania 41, even if he loses to Kevin Owens? Clark, let me get your thoughts on this one.
I mean, boy, I don't think he's going to lose to Kevin Owens, but boy, I hope he's not still the champion by 41. Like, I want Rock Roman to headline 41. I think that's probably too quick, and it doesn't appear to be in the cards right this second. But if we're asking just like my personal wishes, yeah, no, I hope he drops it somewhere along the way, whether it's Orton or somebody else, and we figure out a way to get that thing back on the OTC, who we just discussed for 20 minutes. But that's at least my thoughts. I mean, I could see him holding it at 41 and having a big time match with a number of different names, Rock included. We've discussed that at length on this very show. But as far as my own personal wishes, no. As far as my own personal prediction, he probably is still holding it.
Yeah, no, I've been torn on this, and we've spoken about this before, Clark, but part of me feels like at WrestleMania, it is going to be Roman Rock, and Rock's going to beat Cody for the title at Royal Rumble. But the issue with that is Rock's schedule. Can he really come back when he's filming Moana and all that?
All I'm saying is this. So. Rock Reigns is a Hall of Fame Major League Baseball player, and Rock Reigns will be a Hall of Fame professional wrestling match. That's all I'm saying.
I want the match. My stance has not changed from last year. I don't want it for the title. I didn't want it for the title last year. I don't want it for the title this year.
It's the biggest fight in the industry. It's got to be for the title.
I don't care. I know that it is the biggest fight in wrestling. I understand that. But for the same reason, I'm not that interested in seeing Rock. I wouldn't mind seeing Rock Cody, not at Mania, but I wouldn't. But I'd be up for
not at Mania.
Well, no, I'd have it. The problem I have is I don't want my WrestleMania main event being something I can predict from space. I don't want, I can predict that The Rock is not going to beat Cody at Mania. He's not.
Whoa, what if they did it in space?
If they're going Rock Roman for the title.
Yeah, but then what happens? Your WWE, your biggest championship in the industry disappears for a year.
Unless he comes back at SummerSlam. Perhaps it's
okay, so then it's gone for 5 months.
It's still not great, but I could see them doing it.
I would lose my rag. I don't mind part-time champions. I do mind part-time champions that don't show up for 6 months. I agree on that. Same problem I had with Logan. Same problem I had with if you take the title and then disappear for months with that top championship. At least Roman was defending it every 2 or 3. And even then I started to get frustrated with it. But anyway, I should say I think Cody is still champion at Mania. And I do think actually that there is stuff with Rock and Cody and Roman and all that going forward. And I do want to see all of those combinations. I do. Trust me, I want to see Rock Roman. I said this last year. This year, I wanted to see Rock Roman, just not then. So what I don't want it to become is we spend all these years with Roman as champion, finally get the title on someone else, and immediately we go, right, how do we get it back on Roman again? Or how do we put it on the Rock?
That's true as well. With Roman?
Yeah. We need, at some point, we've got to move past it. For the world title. Otherwise, we will never get out of the cycle, and it will be the bloodline for the next 15 years. And I
think that's going to be part of it, though. Not for 15 years, but for a few years, that's for sure. We have a few comments here, and then we got to move on. But Shad saying, if Rock becomes a part-time champ, then I'll become a part-time podcaster. Please don't, Shad, because I have a really bad feeling The Rock is going... Well, not necessarily bad feeling, but I have a feeling that Rock is going to be champion, at least for a little bit. Hopefully just for a couple of months.
I actually have a question, though. If he becomes a full-time champion, will you quit your job and become a full-time podcaster?
Well, it sounds like a bet now. That's where this is going, eh?
If The Rock became a full-time champion, I'd love it. I'd be all down for it.
Just for fairness. I'm just saying.
But talking about timings, all of this type of stuff, we need to talk about a certain something, don't we? Because our good friend Coach23 has sent in a question, and he said after the rant that I went on last week, he sent in to me. Did WWE make up to your concern of women's time on SmackDown last Friday? The simple answer, and the short answer, is no. If you're talking about WWE as a whole last week, the answer is an even bigger no. But I'm not going to explain why. Why aren't I going to explain why? Well, because David can explain why a lot better than I can. Go for it, David.
So, I was the one that originally posed this last week when I said that 2 minutes of women's wrestling on SmackDown was pathetic. And, you know, I was not alone on that. Ben said the same thing as well, as did several others. There was obviously a debate that came around that. Was this week's SmackDown better than last week's? Yes. In the same way, I'd probably rather be hit by a unicycle than I would be hit by a bus. But in any event, it's still not good enough. And to express how not good enough it is, I've made some statistics this week. So I've calculated the women's to men's ratio of every single weekly television show this week. So all the WWE shows, AEW, Ring of Honor, TNA, and NWA. They're the shows that I've collated. So we'll start with WWE, as this is what the question was based on. WWE had 6 shows this week. Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Main Event, Level Up, and Speed. In that, they had 162 minutes of wrestling, 27 minutes for the women, and 135 minutes for the men, which comes out in total at 83% of the show of wrestling this week, bell to bell in WWE, was male, with 17% for the women. There was no women's wrestling on Main Event. There was no women's wrestling on Speed. And there was no more than 10 minutes of women's wrestling on any of the 3 shows. This does not include segments. I know there was a segment on SmackDown. I know there was a segment on Raw. This just counts bell-to-bell action. But just so you think this isn't me just ragging on WWE, let's go to the show that I review, AEW. 160 minutes of wrestling across 3 shows. 18 minutes of women's wrestling across 3 shows. 142 minutes for the men, which comes out as 89% of AEW wrestling this week being for the men, including the worst ratio of the week, which was AEW Rampage, which had only 1 minute of women's wrestling this week to 29 minutes of men, which is a 3% statistic for women, which is appallingly bad. We scroll down to TNA. We'll do TNA next. TNA had 67 minutes of wrestling across Impact and Explosion. TNA Explosion was the only show this week that had more women's wrestling than men, but the show, they're only 10 minutes of wrestling combined, so it's not much to go off, but it's something. Overall, that is 84% for the men, 16% for the women. Ring of Honor only had 1 show, their weekly TV show, but that was the worst percentage, with 7% for the women, only 5 minutes to 62 minutes for the men. NWA did the best with 14 minutes of male action to 8 minutes of women, which was 36% for the women, 64 for the men. But again, for NWA, it's only a just under an hour show. It's something, but it's not representative of WWE, which is obviously bigger. So for what I was told last week, which is that I was a crybaby for complaining and that it's only 1 show, we can see from cold, hard stats, it is not just 1 show. The only 1 wrestling show this week in North America had more than 10 minutes of women's wrestling, and that was Dynamite, and that still wasn't good enough, because there was still a massive discrepancy. It is not good enough. I am not taking anything away from the brilliant performers who performed on all of these shows. They deserve more time. And no matter how much time will go into segments and backstage segments and things like that, even if you just look purely from in the ring, the massive discrepancy from men to women in North American TV wrestling is not good enough. It is not nearly good enough, and we can do better than this. I'll give NXT a pass this week because they're normally better than this. It was only 6 minutes of women's wrestling this week. Normally it's more. But generally, it was pathetically bad across the whole sphere. And yeah, it's not good enough. And so much talent. Please use them more. Please use them better. Rant over.
I mean, listen, Chaos might have a cold right now, but I'll tell you, he'll be hot in his room because you've just cooked him. You've just given the cold, hard facts against what he said last week.
And I want to be clear, by the way, I very much agree with David on deserving more time. And just the more and more that I've thought about it, though, one thing, because the statistics, like you said, are appalling. I wonder if the precipice of the problem, though, is what is the percentage roster size wise? Are we looking at smaller?
Well, I'll tell you what. In both companies, in both companies, there's women on social media in those divisions complaining about not having screen time.
I very much understand that. I'm just asking I'm asking here. I'm not trying to go on a broader point or like say that anything. I agree that women's wrestling not only deserves more time, the talent deserves more opportunity to be able to show how great women's wrestling is probably, as far as the talent pool is concerned, the deepest it's ever been. Yeah. But what's interesting to me is I'm also wondering what the roster size, what the ratio is by comparison to the men's roster, like in all of those companies as well. And if that isn't the precipice of the problem, because, you do at some point need healthy bodies. And I'm wondering if what happens is you run yourself into trouble here and you wear down part of the roster too much. And you end up in a spot where now you've handcuffed yourself. And I'm not making an excuse.
I'm gonna have to speed you up because we are gonna need to get on to the next subject in a second. But I mean, here's the thing, Clark. I would agree with you, apart from the fact that, as I said, pardon?
I asked the question. I didn't make a point.
No, I know. No. Sorry. To respond to your question, right? There were women, for example, Tegan Knox, right? On both rosters, they're on Raw, SmackDown, AEW, all of them, who aren't happy at the fact that they're not on TV at the minute. So, Clark, to answer that question, I think there'd be an argument for that if there weren't people on the roster who currently weren't on TV for no reason. But the fact is, their roster's deeper than what they're using.
That's totally fair. It's also the fact 12 women and 18 men. That's a percentage wise.
It can't be the percentage of the rosters cannot be bad enough for 11% to 89% split.
It's not.
It's not bad enough.
It's about 25 to 30% of their roster. The entire of WWE's roster is women, I believe. So it is way higher than what that is. But that's including developmental, which does make up a lot of that percentage.
Hire more women then.
That's what I said last week, David. That's what I said last week. Lord Virus of Nurgle, and I'll just quickly answer this and then we'll move on, is saying the problem is that men are the biggest draw for the wrestling business. As we've said, going into SummerSlam and coming out of SummerSlam, storyline-wise, the biggest story was Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. So that's untrue. Becky Lynch proved those statistics wrong in 2018, 2019, and 2020 when she was the highest drawer for the company. Obviously, right now, the biggest draw is Roman Reigns, but in terms of storylines, like I was saying, heading into SummerSlam and out of SummerSlam, ignoring that return segment of Roman Reigns, the biggest thing on SummerSlam was the Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley match. So that's statistically not true, but it is a bigger issue. And Clark, the question which you brought up is certainly worth another discussion as well. But now let's move on, shall we? Let's now move on to talk a little bit, something even more controversial. Shane McMahon, Shane O'Mac, Mr. Money. He has been talking to Tony Khan. Tony Khan's confirmed it. So Tony Khan's confirmed it. Shane McMahon's confirmed it. They've all confirmed it. And they've just said they're just good friends. They talked about a little bit of good old wrestling. But the internet just doesn't agree. They think they're in cahoots. They think Shane McMahon's going to be all elite. A McMahon in AEW. I wouldn't believe my eyes. But David, my question for you to kick things off. Do you think this is going to happen? Because we have a question submitted, I almost forgot to read out the name, by Jose99. Shout out to you. Who's asking, should Shane McMahon appear at All In?
Should he? No, he shouldn't. Will he? No. No, he won't, I don't think. The thing with Shane McMahon is this. I've got no issue with Shane McMahon being part of AEW. if that's the case. We've had very long, extensive, discussions in our various chats about what this could mean if it comes true. I don't know if it will come true. To be honest, I'm not sure it will come true, if I'm being honest. But if it does, what that ramifications of that would be. Now, I've never had a massive problem with Shane McMahon. When I started, my first introduction to Shane was him coming back in 2016, pre-Mania 32, and seeing that huge ovation that he got when he interrupted Vince and Stephanie and going, wow, this guy's a big deal, and then going back and seeing his old stuff. Obviously, I think we've all become a bit poisoned to Shane with his constant appearances. And did he eliminate Kevin Owens from the Royal Rumble or something the last time we saw him on WWE TV? So, he was, and, people have not always been, some people have been very kind to Shane, other people less so. I don't have a problem with him working behind the scenes in AEW. I have no desire to see him on screen. No desire to see him on screen whatsoever. I don't think he adds anything to the current product. I think he's far better suited working with other people behind the scenes on the business side of things. Whether people agree or disagree on his business acumen, I think he's more suited there than he is waddling out and doing his little dance that I did earlier, with his sneakers and suit for, I don't know how old he is now, but, man in his 50s. I don't, beyond sticking it to WWE by just having a McMahon, which, to be honest, I don't think it won't change anything. Shane coming out's not going to change anything ratings-wise. He's not going to change anything perception-wise. So keep him behind the scenes. Even announce that he's signed if you must. Have him come out once and then have him disappear. Do not, if Shane McMahon is coming into this company, make him a consistent on-screen figure unless you have a damn good storyline reason to do it. And I don't think they do at the moment outside of the Elite, and I still don't think that's good enough. So to be honest, for the most part, I'd leave him be. I'd have him work behind the scenes if he's going to come in at all, which I don't actually think he is, but if he is, work behind the scenes, don't come out and certainly not a Wembley, because I think he might get booed.
Oh, really? I mean, that's a good point as well, right? But the question, Clark, which I want to ask you, David briefly touched upon it. He said he doesn't want to see it. Is, we know they both like shoes, they both love trainers, but could Shane McMahon, if he does show up, side with the Elite?
So I was entirely unsure about whether I would bring this up at all on the show, but I gotta admit, a couple nights ago, I had like a weird half dream, half nightmare where Shane McMahon did debut at All In, but I somehow spoiled it and everybody at WR was like furious with me. And I kept being like, no, I didn't mean to spoil it. Like, I didn't mean to. It was weird. I woke up in the middle of the night and everything, and I was kind of laughing about it. I actually almost texted you guys because it was just such a bizarre dream. So neither here nor there, but my subconscious believes he will debut. And he was siding with the Elite actually in the dream. Personally, I think absolutely no way. He's not debuting. He's not going to be there. He's not going to show up. He's not in the building. If he was going to, it would be with the Bucks, but it's not this weekend. And it's probably not next weekend or the weekend after. I don't think it's really any weekend. I think they might actually just be buddies. And it was nice little time in the middle of the summer during a slow news cycle where we could talk about good old Shane O'Mac and Tony Khan. And I think we're going to end up leaving it there in the long run. That's my personal opinion.
Friends, wrestling friends. But no, I definitely could. I mean, this is why I disagree with you guys. Why in a million years would Tony Khan and Shane McMahon be meeting up and talking about wrestling when they've never met before? Why?
I think Shane wants to do the sequel to the video game. That's my answer.
And my answer would be I do think that was probably a negotiations meeting. I just don't see the negotiations coming true.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm not saying they were there to talk about the price of cheese. They were there for a wrestling based reason, and they were there for a business based reason. It could be something to do with the very inner workings. Clark talked about the video game. Could be anything. Doesn't have to be a massive stake in the company. Shane is a businessman in the same way that TK is. But I do think it was related to wrestling and to AEW. I'm just not convinced that will come to anything. But if it does, then I do think it's certainly very possible.
I mean, it would be crazy, absolutely. We have a few comments here I want to get to. Numero 1 Superfly is saying Shane should definitely appear at All In, and what he should do is sign a contract to reveal that he now owns AEW.
The name on the contract does say McMahon.
Do you know what I'd actually do, right? And I'll call this right now, just in case it does happen. What I'd actually do is, like, Tony Khan come out at Wembley to announce a new TV deal with Warner Brothers for AEW, and then Shane come out to, like, announce that Warner Brothers have hired him to do some role or something, and he's the name on the contract of the new TV deal. Like, have it be something like that. Not where he owns the company, but you kind of make reference to that, and you also announce the TV deal. Yeah, exactly.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I do think actually, I'm going to change my mind slightly on something. I do actually think that Shane being the mouthpiece for the Elite would be very funny.
That's
I just
what
don't
I mean.
know.
It would be.
I'm not sure if honestly, I don't know if Shane would be up for it now, being presented as a heel. He was obviously a heel in WWE. I just don't know if he would right now want to come into a new company and be seen as the corporate stooge from the old place. I don't know if his ego would allow that. I hope I'm wrong. I certainly don't want to see him be a face and come out and expect people are going to love him, because they won't. Especially not in AEW.
They'll love him for the first few weeks, I think. But Wembley, you might be right.
I mean, I even think
English fans are brutal as well, so you never know with them.
But everyone loves the song too, so here comes the money. At least the first.
But that's owned by WWE. 1000% can't be used.
No, but they'll do a remix.
Oh, they can't. They can't use it in any capacity. It is owned by WWE. That one.
Basically got half of Brian's old theme in his current one.
But that's why the reason they're part of it is it was a privately owned theme. It wasn't a WWE theme.
Yeah,
and it's also Flight of the Valkyries, which has been around for a long time.
That's what I mean. It's because it's not owned by WWE. They can, they can use it. So yeah, I mean that they can do that. I know with some people's themes they have done blatant, very similar ones, but I don't even think they could use the term "Here comes the money" in it. I think that's owned by WWE too. I know
he's not really. Get Jimmy Hart to do it. He was the king of it back in the day. Doing WCW themes that were so similar to the WWE ones. You could cut it with a knife, but it was just slightly different.
I mean, how about DDP's? DDP's was a straight up Nirvana ripoff. Like, that is Nirvana. That was like the #1 song on the pop charts at the time. Yeah. And DDP's is just like a lyricless version.
It's gonna be like, where's the dollar? Dollars here we go, or something like that. It's not really good.
Here comes the sterling. Here comes the sterling. Sterling.
And then Raheem Sterling comes out. That's where he decides to leave. He's left Chelsea and he's joined AEW. On that note, guys, it does bring us to the end of the show. Thank you, David. Thank you, Clark. It's been a fun one. And thank you to everybody who submitted questions and watched along with us today. If you did enjoy, please leave a like and comment down below. We really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. Shad, Geordie, and Clark will be reviewing Monday Night Raw. It's going to be a fun one, and we'll see you then.